Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today to talk about how learning has evolved and what that evolution means for modern worlds. Modern audiences. My name is Bree LaBollita, and with me is my colleague, Kristen Hubbard. Kristen and I work with Nth Degree Events, where we work with organizations to help them strategically plan their event content. So what that means is we work with clients from the call for submissions, identifying what questions to ask in the call for submission process, through identifying the different session formats that they should have at their event based on their attendee makeup, as well as the number of sessions that they should hold at their events based on the number of attendees they're anticipating. So as you can imagine, understanding how people learn is critical to our success. So we wanted to start today by understanding how you guys learn. So with a show of hands, how many people here like to learn by watching something? Okay, great. How about by listening? Just by listening. All right, we have a few listeners, great. Reading? Excellent. And doing? Yes, okay. So I can tell you that my children who are Gen Zs, they're not listeners. I think they're more the doers sometimes. But as you can see, everybody learns and consumes information differently. So with that in mind, we wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about how generations learn. So I'm going to start off by saying, do generations learn differently? And I think based on my segue into this section, we can all safely say yes. The truth of the matter is that studies have shown that the generation in which you were born actually contributes to how you like to learn. From boomers to Gen X to millennials to Gen Z, we all have our own personal preferences on how we like to learn and our beliefs. So it's something to keep in mind that every generation has their own preferences, expectations, and beliefs when it comes to their learning style. The Freeman Report noted that it's essential to analyze attendees on a matrix consisting of age, gender, and role. And these motivators allow you to understand exactly who attends your events and what type of experiences they seek so that you can deliver the personalized value that they've come to expect. Recognizing the differences in generations' learning styles is a critical element to developing, designing, and delivering successful sessions at your event. So we're going to go through the different generations quickly, starting with baby boomers. And although a lot of baby boomers are at a point where they are looking to retire, or some have already retired, and we are going to spend the majority of our time today talking about Gen X, Gen Y, and Gen Z, we do have boomers still in our audiences, so it is important to understand how they like to learn as well. Baby boomers are our traditionalists. These guys have lived through a crazy amount of technological change over the last 50 years, and they have managed to adapt to the modern world. But they're still most comfortable in the structured, instructor-led formats. These guys thrive in the classroom setting. They want the clear guidelines, the clear expectations when they walk into a session room. They want handouts. They want the actual physical handouts. This is where they thrive best. But when you look at these guys, they also enjoy interactions, but their interactions are more based on more of the small group discussions. You know, that's what they like. They like to do the Q&A. They like that type of participation and have the opportunity to have reflection. They're interested in growth. They want to see how they can grow. So when you're looking at putting together sessions for this generation, you really want to look at a structured, interactive session format where they have the opportunity to participate and where growth is front and center. Next, we're going to talk about Gen Xers, and I'm a Gen Xer. These guys are the bridges between the technology the traditional and the digital worlds, rather. These guys they were present for the rise of the internet, for video games, for AI. They are our latchkey kids. These guys are independent, self-reliant learners. They enjoy the flexible, self-paced, and practical real-world learning experiences. They prefer a mix of both traditional and technology-based experiences, but they also value the interaction and the custom learning paths. They will engage for you for a full 50 to 60 minutes, provided the content is concise, it's evidence-based, it's visually appealing, and it's combined with interaction. They will engage the entire time for 50 to 60 minutes. Unlike our millennials. Millennials are, let me step back. The difference between baby boomers and Gen Xers and how they learn wasn't hugely different. There were definitely differences, but it wasn't as dramatic as millennials. Millennials just learn differently. And if you talk to a baby boomer or you talk to a Gen Xer, anybody who is younger than they are, who doesn't follow the same traditions or values as they do, is considered a millennial. But these guys are they're highly tech savvy, so that makes sense. They're highly tech savvy, they are collaborative, and they are driven by their personal experiences. They thrive in the interactive, informal, flexible learning environments. They are people who want to learn anytime, anywhere, and create their own learning path. But they have short attention spans. Their attention spans, they want sessions that are 30 minutes or less. They want the sessions to have a digital component to it with just a small, short, brief human component associated with it. So keep that in mind when you're working with millennials. Gen Zs are similar to millennials. However, they are the digital tech savvy individuals of the modern world. They're the true digital natives. They've grown up with social media, with smartphones, and with being connected all the time in their daily lives. These guys are the ones that had to first deal with cyberbullying. You know, they have really grown up expecting technology to be integrated into their learning experiences. And when you're looking at them, they have a very digital first mentality. Everything is going to be online for them. There's always a digital component. So when you're looking at sessions for them, they value personalization. They want that, but they also value flexibility, learning anytime, anywhere. So in creating sessions for them, although they are the generation that is all digital, that's always online, they crave the personal interaction. They crave the collaboration. So you want to make sure that you have sessions that are a mix of both traditional and technology-based so that they can engage in that technology and interactive format with people and technology. So that was a lot of information. Bold Push was kind enough to provide a grid that really outlines the differences between the older generations and the younger generations. And as you can see, the older generations like the longer session formats, where the younger generations, as I just mentioned, like the shorter formats. They want the micro learning. They want short bursts of information that's accessible and digestible. The older generations like the more formal presentations. They like the talking heads. They like to go into a session and know exactly what they're going to get out of it. Where the younger generations likes the mixed media. They like a combination of both, a little bit of a person, but they want the interaction. They want the digital components. They want to be able to access this information anywhere, at any time. Which goes to the event format. Older generations like the traditional conference style formats, where the younger generations, they want the hybrid formats. They want to be able to, again, have a blend of the digital world with the human world and real people interaction. And they also like the engagement. The Pri-Med team was just talking about the structured networking. Structured networking for older generations is huge. The younger generations, they like constant participation. They want a voice in everything. And they like the social media aspects for networking. But there are also similarities. And the similarities really come in the ways of personalization and face-to-face learning. When you think about that, it's important to make sure that from a personalization and face-to-face learning, that you're really looking at the depth of the content that you're providing. The depth of the content is something that you can provide from a growth opportunity, from a stretch perspective. You want to make sure that you're providing them with not just 101 level content, but also content that is going to be a stretch for them, that's going to be more in-depth, that's going to be more technical. Content that's going to allow them to think and to grow and to learn. From the personalization and face-to-face learning perspective, in a day when everything is more digital and more remote than ever before, we want to make sure we're facilitating those face-to-face interactions. So keep that in mind as you're starting to pull together content, whether it be on the show floor or in actual session rooms. Those are things that you definitely want to be thinking about.
Thank you. All right, so now that we understand sort of the different generations, how they learn and how they prefer to learn, we need to talk a little bit about the learning shift that we're seeing going on and how that is affecting this shift. So to understand that shift, you need to understand the driving changes behind that. And of course, technology and digital advancements are leading the charge in how learning is changing. So with advancements in technology, there is a trickle-down effect. So it's leading to things like shortened attention spans that Bree talked about. It's this cultural shift to more on-demand content, being able to get it when, where, when you want it on your own time frame, which is also changing the expectations of the younger generations. But one of the biggest things that we are seeing for events specifically is a shift in the workforce demographics. We are in one of the biggest shifts that we've seen with baby boomers aging out of the workforce and those Gen Zers entering the workforce. And as Bree mentioned, they learn in very different ways. So to take a quick look at those demographics, this chart is from the US Department of Labor Statistics. It's from their 2024 report. And currently we have baby boomers at 15% of the generational workforce share, Gen Xers at 31%, millennials coming in with the largest share currently at 35%, and Gen Zers coming in at 18%. And we know that that 18% is definitely going to increase over the next couple of years. So what does that look like moving forward? So again, this graph is also from the US Department of Labor Statistics. And the two areas that we're going to look at is really, we're going to focus on 2032 and what the generational workforce share looks like. So a couple of key things to note here is actually the age group of people 65 and older is actually going to see the largest and fastest percentage increase in the generational workforce share by 2032. And the reason for that is changes in things like Social Security, private pensions, economic standings, things like that, that is going to actually keep that Gen X generation in the workforce a little bit longer than their predecessors. And what that means is we can't forget about this group. As we think about those Gen Zs coming in and trying to cater to them, we can't forget about the Gen Xers because they are going to be the ones that are holding those positions with decision-making power within their organizations. So again, they're still going to be a very important audience. Looking at the completely opposite end of the spectrum, the alphas that we didn't really talk about are actually going to decrease their entrance into the workforce by 2032. And the reason why is because of the decrease in population growth over the past couple of decades. But as we know, millennials will continue to hold the largest portion of the workforce share by 2032. But again, those Gen Zers, those digital natives, will continue to become a very important part of the workforce, driving some of the content moving forward. So, and it's really important for sort of more traditional or legacy brands and events to think about, because those Gen Zers do come from a digital first approach. So what I think about when I think about a digital first approach, I think about the Instagrammable approach. And that's because I'm a millennial. But if I was a Gen Zer, maybe it was a TikTokable approach. But when I say Instagrammable approach, I mean quick, impactful, and memorable. What can we do from a content standpoint that is Instagrammable? And I know Bree talked about some of the shorter format content, but sometimes that's not feasible, especially when you need CME or CEU credits. You need those long format sessions. So what can you do from an Instagrammable approach within those long format sessions as well? Now, because of these workforce shifts and the different learning styles of the different generations, what we really need to focus on is creative, effective learning environments. And there is a ton of research on this, and we are going to talk about one of the more recent ways of learning. So, who knows what VARC stands for? Raise of hands. Anybody know what VARC stands for? No? Okay. So VARC stands for visual, auditory, reading and writing, and kinesthetics. It is a multimodal approach to learning that uses multiple senses and communication styles to enhance the overall learning experience and retention of that learning. So research has narrowed it down to these 4 categories or these 4 modalities because of the different ways that individuals learn. So when you take these modalities and you incorporate them into your program, it really helps cater to those generational preferences and leads to improved overall content outcomes. So pretty much better scores, which everybody always wants, and better retention from your attendees. So to take a quick look at these modalities, we have visual, which is graphs, charts, infographics, anything that is a visual aid. Auditory consists of things like podcasts, discussion groups, recordings fall into this category. We have reading and writing, which constitutes things like note-taking, assessments, case studies. And then we have kinesthetics, which is really an important area. It's anything that is interactive. And all of the generations, as Bree mentioned, respond really well to this kinesthetics area. So it includes things like hands-on, role-playing, scenario training, and things like that. So we are going to do an activity in a few minutes, and it's going to incorporate VARC into that activity. But before we get there, I'm going to turn it back over to Bree to talk about designing impactful learning.
All right. So we spent some time talking about generations and how they like to learn. Kristen just went through the different VARC learning styles. And now we want to talk about how to incorporate them all together. How do we bring it all together? As we discussed, one of the key takeaways is that generations value personalization in their learning experience. This means it's essential to truly understand who is in your audience, who your attendees are, and how they like to learn. In doing that, you can offer a mix of session formats and engagement styles that ensure that the event is impactful, meaningful, and engaging to the various generations. And then this will allow them to tailor their experience and maximize their participation at your event. So let's talk about formats. As we talked about, the younger generations really prefers probably some of the more modern formats. And these formats probably work really well on show floors as well. So keep that in mind. The younger generations want those technology-rich, visually engaging types of sessions, interactions, and things of that nature. So the multimodal learning approaches that Kristen just talked about with the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetics, having those hand-on opportunities, having the visual graphics is key. But they also want the micro-learning. So going back to the millennials and the Gen Zs, they want the short sessions. They want under 30 minutes, under 20 minutes. So they want bite-sized content. They want content that's accessible, that's digestible, and flexible. They can access it anywhere at any point in time. Those micro types of learning, they're very specific topics. They have very specific learning objectives. But you also want to offer sessions that are like problem-based. Those sessions offer critical thinking. It allows your attendees to think critically. They're not passively learning. It also allows for engagement. It helps them with retention. It helps them with comprehension and application of the content that you're trying to convey. But we can't forget about those traditional formats, those longer, more structured, organized formats. And I get why the younger generations don't like these formats, because it's very passive learning. It's limited flexibility, less dependence on technology, which they all love their technology, and it's often in a physical classroom. But there is goodness to the traditional formats. You go into a traditional format, you know exactly what you're getting. There are clear objectives, there are clear expectations that you are going to get out of it. Another piece of the goodness is often a lot of the continuing education credits require these longer sessions. So you have to keep that in mind. You do want to work these into your session mix at your events. And they don't always have to be boring, or I shouldn't say boring, but they don't always have to be those long drawn out ones. You can incorporate technology into them. You can do polling via technology. You can do polling how Kristen and I did it today with just a show of hands or having people stand up. You can also record the presentations, and if you do record them, you can post them online after the event. You can do the AI snippets of those recordings so people don't have to listen to all 50 or 60 minutes of them. They can, see a quick little blurb, 3 slides that tells you everything you need to know about what happened in that session. You can put additional white papers or a PDF of the presentation online. That covers all of your generations. Everybody can access the information when, where, and how they want to digest the information that is most comfortable with that for them. So, and again, remember, for your attendees to feel the value of the content at your event, you need to understand who your attendees are and how they learn. And by doing that, the most valued educational content will actively immerse and engage your participants. That is how they're going to feel the value. That's how they're going to maximize their participation at your event. So, Kristen? Oops, I may have skipped one.
That's okay.
Skip one.
All right, I'm going to jump into 2 quick things before we move into our activity. So, poor learning environment. So we've all been there. We've been excited to be at an event. We're walking to our first session. We walk through the door and we automatically think this isn't going to work for me. It's crowded. You feel like you're squeezing into a chair that's in a middle school cafeteria. Maybe it's a workshop session and it's set up theater style, so that's not going to work either. And then to top it all off, it's either really hot or really cold. I feel like really cold usually.
It's usually really cold.
But we've all been there. It's something that we've all heard, we've all seen, we've all experienced. But ultimately, when these environmental details are off, your focus automatically shifts, and the learning truly does suffer. So your attendee goes from being excited about learning something to just trying to make themselves feel comfortable. Or worse, they are commiserating in how uncomfortable they are, and the entire session overall starts to suffer. So when we're thinking about designing educational sessions, we want to go beyond just the content and the format, and we want to look at the experience as a whole. And we do understand that there are certain limitations in the venues that you have, but what are the little things that you can do to help the environment overall? So when we think about good learning environments, when people feel safe and comfortable, collaboration automatically improves and learning outcomes significantly rise. So physical space can make a difference. I always recommend flexible layouts, something that allows for movement, for group discussions, for interactivity. However, if it is a session that is catering to sort of some solo activity, you want to make sure that the room is set up correctly. One of the examples that I like to talk about too is show floor sessions, because sometimes content on the show floor is really difficult to manage or to execute. And that's because show floors are lively, they're exciting, there's a lot going on, they're noisy. So when you're thinking about the environment, there are a couple of things to really focus in on to sort of mitigate some of those challenges that we face from an environmental experience. And the first one is sound bleed. So there is a lot of technology out there now where you can do silent theaters, you can strategically place speakers under certain chairs, you can do hard walls or heavy drape to help mitigate some of that sound bleed. The other one would be visual interference. That is a big one that not a lot of people think about sometimes, and it's not necessarily just the visual interference from your audience, it's for your speaker as well. If your speaker gets distracted by something that's happening out on the show floor because they are looking out, they can get distracted and the content can suffer overall. So again, when we're thinking about good learning environments, we want to try and mitigate any challenges that we're facing and try and facilitate some of that interactivity. So with that, we are going to move into our activity really quickly. What we're going to do is on your tables at the end, there are some worksheets, and we're going to revisit that VARC multimodal learning approach. So what we would like you to do, you can do this as a full table, you can divide it up into 2 or 3 groups. We want you to try and come up with as many session content types as you can, and categorize them into the 4 different modalities that are listed there. Try and come up with at least 2 for each. We're going to give you about 5 to 7 minutes to do this, so it is quick, and then we'll talk about some of the outcomes in a few minutes. So your time starts now. All right. So we're gonna talk about some of the results, some of the things that you guys came up with. We'll share some of the concepts that Bree and I put on the slide as well. But does anyone want to volunteer to tell us one of their visual session types that they came up with? Anybody? No? All right, well, here are some of the concepts that Bree and I came up with. So things that fall into the visual category are things like poster sessions, sketch noting, anything that is digital, data visualization, demonstrations, AR and VR experiences all fall within this category. What about auditory? Anyone come up with some good auditory session types?
I heard podcasts.
What?
Somebody,
Product theaters, yeah.
I said somebody over here said podcasts.
Yeah. Perfect. All right. Yeah. Some of the concepts are podcast style, storytelling, debates. Debates can be really interesting and have a lot of retention if they are done well. Expert bars, ask me anything. These are all auditory concepts. What about reading and writing? Anyone want to share? Case studies, yes. Case studies, things like guided journaling, writing, coding, chart review, reflective prompts, white papers, case studies are all great session types that fall into this category. Self-paced digital learning also traditionally falls into this category as well. What about kinesthetics? Labs, yeah?
They're going for
Yes. All right, so it's anything that's interactive. So labs, human voting, problem-solving challenges, speed dating, prototyping zones, anything that's user experience or that incorporates movement into the session as well falls into this category. So ultimately, you want to look for ways to provide flexibility and customization, allowing specific topics to be tailored to the needs of different audiences using those VARC learning styles. So on the screen here, we have a couple examples of some of those learning types that we just talked about. One that I will point out is the woman in the yellow jacket in the top corner. That is a depiction of sketchnoting, something great to do on a show floor. You're getting rid of the traditional PowerPoint presentations and you're actually sketching out the session content. So things like that are great for the show floor as well, because that content goes beyond just that one session. It's something you can keep in your booth or you can keep in the theater and attendees can interact with or look at on an ongoing basis. So, but if you wanted to sort of deepen your session design and take that activity that we just did, here are some prompts. So we won't be able to get to this today, but this is your homework. I highly recommend you think about these concepts when you are planning your next educational programming. You're taking those session types, you're overlaying it with what generations are best for those session types, and then you want to overlay it with what experience is best for them from an environmental standpoint. So once you are able to understand the content, the generation, and the format, your overall content will be enhanced. So again, this is just some prompts for you. There are copies of this on your tables as well if you want to take pictures of them to do before your next planning event. So before we wrap up the presentation, I just wanted to go back to those sort of VARC multimodal learning styles and just give you some examples of how we tried to incorporate these items into the presentation today. So from a visual standpoint, we tried to provide as many graphs, charts, or images that enhanced what we were talking about. From an auditory standpoint, we had the group discussion. We had some answers from the audience. We will try and get to some Q&A at the end as well. From a reading and writing standpoint, we incorporated the bullet points, quotes, which resonate with people sometimes, or they remember them a little bit better, reflective prompts, which is your homework, and then the handout. And then from a kinesthetics perspective, we had the activity, which included some critical thinking, and again, that group discussion. So sort of to wrap everything up, we are going to talk about some key takeaways.
Yes, and we're going to start with make sure you include the personalized cross-generational learning experiences at your event. Make sure you understand who your audience is so you have the right type of learning engagements in the event mix for your attendees.
All right, the next one is to tip the scale towards face-to-face interactive content experiences. Again, hone in on that kinesthetic area. All generations respond really well to that sort of face-to-face interaction.
And then design the diverse session formats to appeal to the different generations. Again, you want your attendees to feel the value of coming to these events. And the way they're going to feel this value is by being able to personalize their journey while they're there. And to do that, you need to have the different formats that appeal to them specifically.
All right. Next, we have use tech thoughtfully to facilitate real-world learning. And I think the key word here is thoughtfully. You definitely want to use technology thoughtfully based on the generation and make sure that you are still that it's not too far-fetched and that you're still have that real-world learning experience.
And then you want to foster professional networking and growth opportunities. Again, different generations learn differently. They like to network. They like to network in different ways. Some of them like structured networking. Some of them like the social media. Some of them like the hands-on interactions. But make sure you're fostering that networking opportunity, and then offering the content that's just not at a 101 level, but making sure that you are providing content that is more in-depth, that is more technical in nature, that will really stretch your attendees, and they will walk away feeling that they have learned something new, that they have been thinking, and it's more valuable to them from a growth perspective.
And then last but not least, review and understand your audience makeup. Of course, a lot of this presentation was about the different generations and how they learn, and understanding who is coming to your sessions can make a really big impact when you are catering to their learning preferences. So with that, I am Kristen Hubbard. This is Bree LaBollita. We are from Nth Degree Events. We have a QR code here. It is a white paper if you would like to download it. It is more about the topics that we discussed today. We want to thank you for having us here today, and happy to take any questions if anybody has any.
Everybody's just ready to be done for the.
We have one.
I guess my question would be around examples or best practices, knowing that sometimes we may not know the audience until we're there, right? From like at least a generational standpoint. Have you seen, I guess, real world examples where you're able to maybe provide questions to the audience up front and pivot formats? Because I think it might be hard to determine that up front, especially if we're like newer exhibitors and don't know the audience that well. Have you seen use of that format to kind of shift presentation styles?
Yeah, I think that actually when everybody raised their hand here earlier about how they like to learn, it gave me some insight into kind of the different generations that we have in this room. I think we might have a lot of Xers in this room, but I could be wrong, I'm just guessing. But yes, sometimes asking the question, you can pivot, you know your content better than the other people that are sitting in the room. So you can pivot the content at that point once you kind of ask that opening question and taking it from there and pivoting it down to the generation that would be most appropriate and how they would like to learn the information. Is that answering your question? Okay.
Yeah, I would just to add to that, I would say too, it's a lot about the presenter as well, and how comfortable the presenter is with pivoting with things like that. They could prepare, 2 different activities based on, the audience that comes into the room and be prepared for both. It's a lot more prep work, but if your presenter is comfortable with doing that, you could definitely do that as well if you're unfamiliar with the audience. But I would definitely ask whatever event you go to for audience demographics. A lot of event organizations do have it, and it can help you prepare ahead of time for the potential group that is in your session.
And I think Kristen made a great point about who the presenter is. Some presenters aren't going to be as comfortable making the switch on the spot like that. I don't know, has anybody here ever participated in or seen a Pecha Kucha? I shorten it to a PK. I always call them PK. Those sessions, it's like I think it's 6 minutes and 9 seconds or something, but you only have 30 seconds per slide, or it's a certain number of sessions or minutes per slide, and it automatically changes on you. People have to be prepared for those types of sessions. They're fun. We've done them at events where it's actually been more of the networking engagement style setting, and it was just I call it a little bet, one of those things that let's try this at this event, see how it goes, and if it takes off, great, we can implement it in other events, in other places, maybe a bigger setting. But we had a speaker who was absolutely amazing with this, and so we created the slides for him, and he got there, but we threw in we knew he was a great speaker. We threw in some fun slides in the middle of it. So he might be presenting on something, and in the middle of it, there was, KFC, because he loves KFC. There was a KFC logo, and he just went with it and just started talking about the importance of KFC with, medical devices, however he tied it in. But those can be a lot of fun. You can make those types of environments fun, but the speaker, the presenter, has to be comfortable with kind of turning in the moment of who the audience is. Mm-hmm. Some will be better than others.
We have another question over here.
So in many instances, you can't really change the presentation, right?
Right.
So would you suggest if there's follow-up afterward to then how you follow up with the attendees afterward, change that based on the audience? Whether it's an email or something different to engage based on the audience type?
Yeah, so you can't change the presentation in the moment usually, unless you're going with something like sketchnoting, because that is real time in the moment, creating what that session looks like from a visual standpoint. But yeah, I think afterwards you can definitely follow up with other things that can enhance the learning overall that is more geared towards that specific generation. If you see that, the entire session is filled with Gen Zers and maybe your presentation was a little bit more traditional, follow up with them afterwards and maybe give them something digital to interact with that, has the same concepts that they learned within the session room. Any other questions? Yeah. No? Thank you.
Thank you.